Well, thank you. It's nice to be in a place with no riots, and I only saw about a dozen police officers, not 400, so that was exciting. And I did promise the police officers who are not here on overtime that we would try to keep to the time limits that they can go home. But I want to start by, I was just going to launch right into the speech. First, of course, I want to thank Young America's Foundation for sponsoring the event and the local chapter of YAF for doing such a wonderful job getting the word out. And if there are people on the other side, people of the left, if you could raise your hands, I'd like to give you a round of applause for coming, because I appreciate it. Well, thank you. Now, I want to do that because then I'm going to mock you, but that's just the way this goes. That's part of the story. So, in the name of that, I was just going to launch in my speech, but I was handed this pamphlet from the Young Democratic Socialists, all about how capitalism really hasn't done anything for us. I mean, I can tell you one thing capitalism would do for you: it'd get you some better graphic design. I do like some of the facts that are in here. Things like, have you ever wondered why there are 5 times as many empty houses as there are homeless people in the United States? Well, I've never really wondered that, because the people who are building those empty houses are hoping to sell those empty houses, presumably. If you want to see places that are full, there are prison camps in North Korea. And as far as the homeless problem in the United States, it would be remiss not to acknowledge that homelessness is highly linked, unfortunately, to mental illness. So if we're going to talk about the homeless problem, it has far less to do with the availability of housing and far more to do with the fact that we have not done enough in terms of caring for the mentally ill. It says, have you ever wondered why we waste over 133 billion pounds of food, 30 to 40% of the food supply each year, when people still go hungry? I actually had not wondered that ever since I was 5, and my mother said to me, if you don't eat that food, someone in China will starve. And I figured that is not true. If I don't eat this food, then that person in China will have just as little food as that person would have had otherwise, unless you can freeze-dry this sucker and send it over there. And speaking of food shortages, has anybody ever wondered why it is that everyone in Ukraine from like 1930 to 1933 had none of it? It has more to do with socialism than with capitalism. And it says, have you ever wondered why just 8 men own as much wealth as the other half of the world? I haven't really wondered that either, since capitalism has raised literally half the globe from abject poverty since 1980. And it turns out that those people who are enormously wealthy have generated more wealth for more people than have virtually anyone else on the planet. And says, have I ever wondered why college students are saddled with the burdens of debt so they can become qualified? I have, and I also wonder why you would spend money to come to a college so you could learn nothing and put out garbage like this. That seems like a waste of money. My favorite part of this pamphlet is actually this particular page right here, where it says, did you know? And then there's a picture of Albert Einstein and a picture of Martin Luther King and a picture of Helen Keller. And it says, did you know Einstein, Martin Luther King Jr., and Helen Keller were socialists? I figure they did that because it wouldn't look as good if it said, did you know that Stalin, Mao, Hugo Chavez, and Castro were socialists? It turns out that being a socialist in America, which has not embraced socialism, is a really lucrative and nice thing. You can become famous, you can become rich, you can become well-known without ever having to implement any of your ideas. So that's convenient.